Welcome back. Now that we understand the box model, we can look at how to use CSS in creative layout design. First, we need to understand that CSS element positioning is the ability of CSS to control the display of overlapping positioned elements. And it allows you to achieve any layout you can imagine without verbose code. What are the benefits of using CSS in your layouts? Firstly, it is the web standard as defined by the World Wide Web Consortium, which is the international community that develops web standards. It also allows for an easier distinguished method to separate the content from the project's visual properties, including positioning and formatting, which in turn means that styles can be changed independently from the content. Of great significance is that load time of pages will be much faster as well. And one shouldn't forget that HTML was created for text and hyperlinks, not for positioning content. It will never be excellent at it because it was not the intention of its creation. Therefore, it is best to utilize a program such as CSS that was tailor-made to handle positioning. How will CSS make your life easier while you code? As mentioned, it will enable you to create global site-wide changes. It will offer consistency across pages, enabling you to troubleshoot quicker. And lastly, CSS offers property specific to positioning. We will look at them in a while, but first you need to understand the normal document flow. Do you remember the list of websites you looked at during Unit 2? They were coded using only HTML. They are not as exciting as some of the websites you might be used to, but they provide a good understanding of the normal document flow when you look at the code behind the sites. It is very easy to follow since the visual display of the site mimics the sequence of the linear HTML code of the document. The normal document flow is when nothing has been altered on the page in terms of layout. It is the default setting, so to speak, and it is controlled by HTML. When a website is read by a browser, the browser identifies the block elements and stacks them in the order it was scripted, from top to bottom. These elements are HTML tags such as block elements, for example, a div tag, or inline elements such as images or photos. Since pages will naturally want to default to the normal document flow, it is best practice to use the normal document flow as much as possible. Then, layout tweaks will be minimal and the code will be much more streamlined. Use CSS to position elements that will deviate from that normal document flow. As I already mentioned, CSS contains properties specifically created to address the positioning of elements on a page. When using the position property, there are three types to choose from: absolute, relative, and fixed. The position property actually also accepts a fourth value, namely static, which is the default. It creates no effect. To set an element's position on a page, you need to specify coordinates using the top and left properties. But remember, they are only valid on positioned elements. When choosing absolute positioning, elements are removed from the normal document flow and repositioned based on top, left, or bottom offset values. They are placed relative to the nearest positioned ancestor or parent. When we look at the example, you'll see a class named box has been specified. An absolute position on the screen or viewport has been allocated to it. As in the illustration, you can see box 1 has been removed from the normal document flow and box 2 took the place where box 1 used to be. When relative positioning is applied to an element, that element is still viewed as part of the normal document flow, but you can offset the element from its normal position using top, right, bottom, or left offset values. In the example, the position of the element is exactly the same as the previous example, the only difference being that a relative position is specified. The other elements, in this example box 2 and 3, don't move up to take its space, but reserves that space for box 1. It also calculated its position relative to the original position. When a fixed position is applied, the position is not calculated from the relative position or the position of other elements. Instead, it is calculated from the fixed position of the viewport or screen. It uses the XY axis to perform that calculation. As you can see in the example, this feature is very convenient when you want to fix an element to the screen, or in other words, keep that element exactly in the same position on the screen regardless of scrolling. It is used most often for adverts and navigation bars, essential information that needs to be visible at all times. In the example, the block element named Add has been positioned in a constant place, the top right corner, and that calculation has been determined by the edge of the screen. Now we are ready to look at how some of these concepts can be applied to a basic page structure. Most pages will consist of regions of content that will be represented in the HTML page structure by container elements such as a div tag. In the sketch on the right, you'll see I've divided the page into 5 regions and I named them according to the content it will contain. Header, where the logo and slogan will be inserted. Navigation, where the navigation bar will be located. Sidebar, where additional or interesting content will be. Content, where the main content of the site will be found. And lastly, the footer, with copyright information and an address. On the left is the basic code for that page as it is written in the HTML page. Each region is contained within its own div tag, and all div tags are nestled in the body of the page. Another good habit is to always first code the content and build the structure around that, and then move over to create the styles. Thus, firstly code the HTML and then create the CSS styles. The external CSS style sheet looks as follows. Remember I mentioned the importance of the cascade? You can see in the example that the basic element selectors are placed first since they are more general than the class selector named header. The name header needs to correspond to the HTML page name convention. This page will have a background color that's yellow, and all elements contained within the body of the page will fill 80% of the screen. It will be located in the center with an equal space of 10% on the left and right thereof, and its color will be white. It will have no space at the top or bottom, thus the white will stretch 100% over the length of the screen, but 80% over the width. The header's height is restricted to 50 pixels and it has been allocated a margin bottom of 10 pixels. The navigation bar is added by specifying the position of the div element named nav. The height of the element is 25 pixels. There is no need to specify its position from the top, since it will naturally, within the normal document flow, fall underneath the header element. Adding the two adjacent columns is the first time you'd need to disrupt the normal document flow, because you want them to be alongside one another. As you can see in the code, this is achieved by using the float property. I haven't spoken about the float property yet. It is one of the most popular layout methods used in CSS. Using this CSS property allows an element to float vertically to the left or right of its current position and removes it from the current default document flow. In this instance, the element named Content has been forced to the right and sidebar shifted to the left. This is to ensure they are next to each other. It is important to specify the width of these elements since they already inherited a limited screen space from their parent element being the body. Thus, each has a specified width of 60 and 30% respectively. The last region that needs to be added is the footer. You will notice in the code that a clear property is applied to it. This is to ensure that the float abilities have been cancelled and the footer is able to return to its normal space in the document flow. Congratulations! You've completed Unit 3. We gained an understanding of CSS and how it collaborates with HTML in creating effective and creative websites. We looked at the basic syntax of CSS and the various formatting and positioning properties and how they can be applied. Now you're ready to begin working on your first website. I'll meet you in the next video.